Hi, grade 11. So great for you to be back here with me learning North Star together. Okay, for this semester, we are going to start with Unit 3, Early to Bed and Early to Rise. Early to Rise for school. You got it. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the picture first to get an idea what this is about. Oh boy. That might look like you in the morning before school, no? Me? Definitely. Sleepy, right? When you wake up in the morning, it's sleepy, especially if the sun is up already and you don't have those thick curtains. Boy, you get sleepy in the morning. So that's why I look for coffee. I don't know what you look for. Okay, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to discuss sleeping habits together. Okay. Now, there are a few questions here that we use for our background. Do you sleep well or are you restless? Do you fall asleep easily? Do you talk in your sleep? Do you wake up well rested or are you sleepy in the morning? Are you an early bird? A person who gets up early, or a night owl? That's a person who stays up late. Me? Early bird. I cannot wake up or stay up very long. Boring, right? Do you have dreams or do you have nightmares? Yeah, that's why we pray, right? Before we go to bed. Another one, number 2, an old proverb about sleep says, early to bed, early to rise makes you healthy, wealthy, and wise. Oh, I love that. What does this proverb mean? And do you agree with it? Okay, these are some things I'd like you to think about. So in our Zoom meeting, we can discuss this. So please think about it as building the background to the unit team for Unit 3 and come up with some of your ideas in our next Zoom meeting. Can't wait for that. That's fun. Okay, that leads us into listening 1. How can teenagers get enough sleep since you have so much homework and then you have to do a lot of games and you have a lot of social media to attend to? Boy, you guys are busy. I tell you that. It is not sarcastic. There's a lot that you do. I do believe that. So we're going to talk about that. The vocabulary brings us to the bold-faced words. Here it says that many parents are concerned about their children's sleep patterns. So we're going to look at an online exchange between a parent and a doctor. So pay attention to the bold-faced words. It's about advice from Dr. Jennings. So we're going to look at some words and phrases. Has a tendency to, the course, over the course of. That being said, consistency, pretty well, reset, sleep deprivation, intrinsic, recover, tolerate, clinically proven, and maintain. Such good academic words to learn today. Yeah. Okay, for that matter, I'm going to turn on the audio and take notes while you are listening.
Hi, Dr. Jennings. I'm worried about my daughter Eden, who's a middle school student with sleep issues. She has a tendency to stay up late, and then she's exhausted later on in the day. This sleep pattern is having a terrible effect on her schoolwork. She's falling behind in almost all her classes, and we worry that it's going to get worse over the course of the year. That being said, we think we're doing all we can. We have always told Eden that consistency is really important when it comes to her bedtime routine, but she doesn't seem to be able to go to bed early. I don't know. She seems to be dealing with it pretty well, but obviously we are concerned. What should we do? Sheila Michaels.
Dear Ms. Michaels, it's normal for adolescents to have problems sleeping. Like Eden, if they go to bed too early, they suffer from wakefulness, which can also be difficult. At this age, the body's circadian rhythm, the body's clock, is changing. But don't worry, she'll grow out of it eventually and reset her internal clock. Of course, what you do need to worry about is sleep deprivation. If she wants to sleep in on weekends, let her do so. It's not a sign of slothfulness if she doesn't get up until 1 or 2 p.m., so don't think she's being lazy. It's just the body's intrinsic reaction to being tired. If she gets the rest she needs during the weekend, it will help her recover from her week. If you wish, you can ask her doctor about low-dose melatonin tablets, which can sometimes help. There are even over-the-counter vitamin supplements that seem to be very effective, and most people tolerate those quite easily. There are a lot of remedies that have been clinically proven to work. Good luck with Eden, and don't worry too much. Try to maintain a positive attitude. Dr. Jennings.
Okay, very well. Now, before we continue, I really want to remind you that at the back of your book, we have the audio script. Yeah, so you could always look at that if, for example, you would need that. If it's hard for you to follow the audio, you can look at that. If you go to the back of your book, the audio script is at page 215. And of course, the grammar compilation of all the units are starting from page 213 up to 214. And then the vocabulary list from page 211 to 212. So just look at that in case you would be needing that. Awesome. Okay, we listened to this, and it's definitely has something that a lot of us maybe, or a lot of you maybe, are struggling with. Sleep deprivation, right? Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to match the bold words to the meaning. So today we're going to look at vocab and meaning, definition. Sometimes we do vocab in context of a sentence, context of a paragraph, context of an article or essay. Now what we're going to do is looking at word, and definition. So I'd like you to put the correct number here to the matching definition. You can pause your audio to do that, and when you're done, turn it on again to continue with preview. Go ahead. Okay, there we are again. Here in our preview, we're going to look at some information before we actually go into the audio that we're going to work with today. You already know that previewing is super important, whether that is for listening, whether that is for reading. Either way, very important since it gives us focus, right? Focus to know what type of audio it is, focus to know what topic it has, and the focus to know what the purpose is, which then tells us what to listen for, right? Right. So yeah, previewing is important, right? Yeah, it might seem something like a waste of time, but it just kind of gives your brain a bit of time to adjust and to focus, because we have so much in our mind that we need that few seconds. Okay. In this case, Dr. Michael Howell from the University of Minnesota studies sleep patterns and sleep-related issues facing adolescents. Now, we are going to go over the questions and predict. That's a part of previewing, is when you look at the the topic or so from the audio, know what type it is, and then predict the purpose, right? You're gonna predict Dr. Howell's explanations, and then listen to the introduction to Dr. Howell's report to check your predictions. Were your predictions right or not? So annotate with me. Why are many teenagers always sleeping? Think of several reasons. Remember, annotating is underlining, highlighting, or circling the keywords, or making margin notes, yeah? So in this case, why teenagers sleepy? Reasons. Regarding sleep issues, are human adolescents and young animals similar or different? Sleep issues, human adolescents, young animals, similar or different? Okay, pause to answer that.
A couple key things to think about when you're dealing with adolescents and sleep issues is that adolescents have a tendency to be a bit of night owls. They tend to like to go to bed later and sleep in later, and this is more than just a behavioral choice on their part. Their brains actually act differently, and this has been noticed not only in human adolescents but also in animal models of adolescents. You'll see they actually like to stay up later and go to bed later. This is particularly troublesome in middle school and high school when at the same time this is happening in their brains, the school times actually start earlier. So they both like to go to bed later, but then are forced to wake up earlier and often leads to sleep deprivation.
Awesome. Okay, now take some time to recheck your answers, the things you answered just now. Okay, that brings us to the main ideas. Cool. So now there are two things you can do for me. You're either gonna listen and then you're going to take notes on the main points, main points, and details at the same time, and then answer the questions, or you're going to answer the questions while you are listening to it. So either way is fine with me, what works best for you. Yeah, so either taking notes, 2 columns, main point, detail, and then answer the questions, or answering while listening. Okay? Quick review. Last semester we really worked on the whole idea of general main idea, sub-main idea, main point and detail, and the difference between a summary and a conclusion. So I really want to review this real fast. General main idea is the main idea of the whole audio. In a text it would be the whole text, right? In a text it is found in the thesis statement. In an audio it's an introduction. And then for the sub-main idea, in a text we would find it in the topic sentence, right? In an audio it's mostly also at the beginning. And throughout the audio you can hear. Then the main points are always the development of the subtopics, of the sub-main ideas, and then the details are a further explanation of the main points. Now you gotta remember that a main point can be developed, but a detail cannot. So details are really more into numbers, names, the more specific points that are the development of the main point. Okay? Awesome. Okay, listen to the whole report. You're gonna write true or false and then correct the false statements. So write down whether it's true or false and say then what would be the correct answer. You add that on the margin. Okay? I give you some time to annotate the sentences. Go ahead. Let's start.
A couple key things to think about when you're dealing with adolescents and sleep issues is that adolescents have a tendency to be a bit of night owls. They tend to like to go to bed later and sleep in later, and this is more than just a behavioral choice on their part. Their brains actually act differently. And this has been noticed not only in human adolescents, but also in animal models of adolescents. You'll see they actually like to stay up later and go to bed later. This is particularly troublesome in middle school and high school when at the same time this is happening in their brains, the school times actually start earlier. So they both like to go to bed later, but then are forced to wake up earlier and often leads to sleep deprivation. The only way that you're able to consistently reset your circadian rhythm so that you're able to so that adolescents are able to go to sleep at an earlier time and wake up earlier is 1, through consistency, 2, with sunlight about 20-30 minutes first thing in the morning, helps reset the circadian rhythm, and 3, you can use a little bit of low-dose melatonin, which is just an over-the-counter vitamin supplement about 6 hours prior to bedtime. Those are the only things that have been proven clinically to help people fall asleep earlier. What most studies have demonstrated is that you need to recover typically about half of the sleep that is lost. So in an adolescent who could otherwise sleep 2 more hours a day during the week, that'll add up over 5 days to 10 hours. So over the course of a Saturday and Sunday, if that's the time that they have in the morning to sleep in, they'll need to catch up on that. I think one of the first things to recognize is that sleepiness is not a laziness. I mean, there's oftentimes when we think of children or adolescents who are sleeping in class, it is not typically due to slothfulness or just laziness or disinterest. It is actually an intrinsic loss of sleep. I mean, there's perfectly good examples of kids who are lazy and won't do anything, but that is different from kids who are actually not able to maintain wakefulness. So it's not only school start times, but it's also activity start times. So it's not unusual for an adolescent who is both a swimmer as well as an orchestra to have to be at school and to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. This can be extremely devastating to one's wakefulness. Now that being said, most adolescents are able to tolerate it pretty well, but for some it can be just quite devastating.
Okay, great. You might find a lot of truth in this. Maybe it speaks to you, right? Okay, so I will keep in mind that whenever you're sleepy in my class or you're yawning, that it might not be because you're lazy or not interested. Okay, good. Okay, so you wrote down the true or false, and corrected the ones that were false, which these number 1 and 4 are really only the main points. Now we're gonna look at the details. So now, as you just now listened for the main points, you're now gonna listen for the details, okay? So as I said, you can do that, answer it while you're listening or taking notes for it, and then answer, that is fine. I want you to annotate the questions and the answer choices first. Go ahead. Okay, let's go.
A couple key things to think about when you're dealing with adolescents and sleep issues is that adolescents have a tendency to be a bit of night owls. They tend to like to go to bed later and sleep in later, and this is more than just a behavioral choice on their part. Their brains actually act differently. And this has been noticed not only in human adolescents, but also in animal models of adolescents. You'll see they actually like to stay up later and go to bed later. This is particularly troublesome in middle school and high school when at the same time this is happening in their brains, the school times actually start earlier. So they both like to go to bed later, but then are forced to wake up earlier, and often leads to sleep deprivation. The only way that you're able to consistently reset your circadian rhythm so that you're able to so that adolescents are able to go to sleep at an earlier time and wake up earlier is 1, through consistency, 2, with sunlight about 20-30 minutes first thing in the morning, helps reset the circadian rhythm, and 3, you can use a little bit of low-dose melatonin, which is just an over-the-counter vitamin supplement, about 6 hours prior to bedtime. Those are the only things that have been proven clinically to help people fall asleep earlier. What most studies have demonstrated is that you need to recover typically about half of the sleep that is lost. So in an adolescent who could otherwise sleep 2 more hours a day during the week, that'll add up over 5 days to 10 hours. So over the course of a Saturday and Sunday, if that's the time that they have in the morning to sleep in, they'll need to catch up by that. I think one of the first things to recognize is that sleepiness is not a laziness. I mean, there's oftentimes when we think of children or adolescents who are sleeping in class, it is not typically due to slothfulness or just laziness or disinterest. It is actually an intrinsic loss of sleep. I mean, there's perfectly good examples of kids who are lazy and won't do anything, but that is different from kids who are actually not able to maintain wakefulness. So it's not only school start times, but it's also activity start times. So it's not unusual for an adolescent who is both a swimmer as well as an orchestra to have to be at school and to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. This can be extremely devastating to one's wakefulness. Now that being said, most adolescents are able to tolerate it pretty well, but for some it can be just quite devastating.
Okay, very good. Answer questions 1 until 6. You can pause your video. Okay, we're back with making inferences. You remember that? Making inferences? Yeah? No? A little bit? Okay. Making inferences means that you're trying to look at the facts that you find from an audio or a text, if it would be with reading. You combine facts in order to come to a conclusion. So inferences means that you're looking for the underlying meaning, which is also called implied meaning. That is something that is not literally stated in the text. So it's not the denotation, it's not the literal meaning of what is stated. But in a text we would say read between the lines. In an audio we would say listen between the words, can I say that you're hearing? So you kind of have to listen for the unsaid. And for that, you need to analyze. You analyze to grasp all the facts, then you correlate the facts, you connect them, and from there you will come to a conclusion. You will grasp the underlying meaning, like, oh, what this person really means to say. So now we're talking about understanding assumptions. You know assumptions? Assuming things. Speakers sometimes use statements that imply that their listeners understand or share their assumptions. Listeners need to make educated guesses. That is what we can also call what inference is, an educated guess or inferences about what these assumptions are, because we don't always know. Now, read and listen to Dr. Howell from listening 1. Let's listen to this example.
A couple key things to think about when you're dealing with adolescents and sleep issues is that adolescents have a tendency to be a bit of night owls. They tend to like to go to bed later and sleep in later, and this is more than just a behavioral choice on their part. Their brains actually act differently.
Right. So Dr. Howell assumes that most people think that teenagers are night owls. Why do you think he thinks that? Now, if we're looking at the text here, we can see here we have A, teens choose to go to bed late and sleep in the morning. Or is that assumption because teenagers' brain act differently, causing them to stay up late? Now, in answer A, Dr. Howell implies that people believe that teenagers go to bed late and sleep in late because they want to, not because they need to. This is more than just a behavioral choice, right? So Dr. Howell explains that teenagers' brain acts differently, so they actually need a sleep pattern. That is where we can see how the assumption works. He assumes people to think differently than what actually is the truth. Okay, so we're going to try this. You're going to listen to 2 excerpts from listening 1 and circle the correct answer. So I want you to annotate the first excerpt first, listen, and then you have to grasp the correct answer. Okay, let's go.
I mean, there's perfectly good examples of kids who are lazy and won't do anything, but that is different from kids who are actually not able to maintain wakefulness.
Okay, so in this audio, Dr. Howell assumes that most people think teenagers are sleepy because what most people think, yeah? Not what the reality is. Okay, we're gonna go to excerpt 2. Annotate that one first. To help teenagers, Dr. Howell assumes that most people think it would be enough to...
It's not only school start times, but it's also activity start times. So it's not unusual for an adolescent who is both a swimmer as well as an orchestra to have to be at school and to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. This can be extremely devastating to one's wakefulness.
Yeah. So answer A or B. So basically what we're doing here is we're trying to understand an assumption that is made by a speaker. Okay, great. Now that brings us to the last part of today's lesson, expressing opinions, which is basically evaluating. And that means that we are coming to a conclusion. We are basically bringing together, correlating all the information that we've heard throughout the audio in listening 1. And by looking at these questions, these points, we come to a conclusion as in a justification, what it is that you think, your opinion, your reasoning on the matter, and formulating that. This is a very important part and a very important cognitive level skill for you to do. Remember, we have making inferences as a strategy, we have synthesizing as a strategy. That all builds up to analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And then your final speaking project is the part of creating, where all the information is brought together and is then made into a new product, something that you create by yourself. Awesome beans. Now let's look at number 1. Teenagers naturally need much more sleep than other people do. So you gotta say whether you agree or disagree, and of course give reasons why. And remember to use PEL, yeah, PEEL, point, give your opinion. Then explanation, give your reasons for your opinion. Evidence, give evidence or examples for that opinion. And L, link it back to your point or your opinion. Number 2, because teenagers are involved in so many additional activities these days, sleep deprivation is a more serious problem than it was in the past. Yes or no? 3, High schools should change their schedules. Classes and activities should start and finish much later in the day so that students can feel more rested. Yes or no? Oh, that is interesting. I really want to know what you've got to say about this. Okay, if you don't want to respond to all three, at least make sure you're ready with one of the responses. So in our Zoom class, you can tell me what it is that you think about this. But please take into account all the information you heard throughout listening one. Oh, that's amazing. I think this is a really interesting topic for you to be talking about because it is... I think something that you guys are really battling with. Gives me more understanding towards you as well. Okay, what did we do today in our video listening one? We went over the vocabulary and knowing and matching the correct definition. We did a previewing to predict topic and purpose and what the audio would be about. Then we listened to the audio and had to grasp or get the main points. Then we listened again to be able to get the details that we were hearing. Then we learned to make inferences by understanding assumptions that are made by a speaker. And last, we express our opinion, which is an evaluation of all the material we learned today. Awesome. You guys are amazing. Thank you very much for today. We will see each other really soon in our Zoom class and in our next video. And until then, God bless you and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.